Now, 16 WAPT News takes you on a journey through Mississippi. From Jackson's breaking news leader, America 250, Mississippi's legacy.
Happy birthday, America. 250 years ago, a young nation declared its independence and began the American experiment. But the fight to define freedom, equality, and justice didn't end in 1776. Through war, division, and social change, America continued to evolve. Many of those defining moments happened right here in Mississippi. Our state became the 20th to join the Union. We struggled to find our footing at times. The Civil War, civil rights, politics, financial reform. We also got caught up in global conflicts, World War I and World War II, climate change and natural disasters. I'm here in Vicksburg, where a divided nation began to come back together after the Civil War. Megan West looks at Mississippi's impact on Hollywood, music, and entertainment. Aaron Pickens examines the state's contributions to education, medicine, and innovation. But we begin tonight with the chapter that helped change America forever. From Emmett Till to Medgar Evers to Freedom Summer. Mississippi became the center of the civil rights movement and the fight for equality that reshaped the nation. We documented it all. This is Chronicle. This is America. This is Mississippi. This land tells the story before a single word is spoken. The Mississippi Delta, some of the most fertile soil on earth. For generations, it produced extraordinary wealth. Most of those who worked it saw almost none of the beauty in it. Enslaved Black Mississippians built this economy with their bodies. When the Civil War came, many fought for the Union, not just for freedom, but also for the promise that came with it. The right to vote, the right to participate, the right to share in what their labor had built. For a brief moment during Reconstruction, that promise looked real. Black Mississippians held office. They voted. They governed. Then came 1877. Federal troops withdrew, and within years, many of the political gains began to disappear as white leaders reasserted control of state government. Before Carol Rhodes became a civil rights attorney, he spent his youth studying the history that wasn't taught in school. The history of people like Alexander Kelso Davis, who served as Mississippi's first and only Black lieutenant governor, state legislators, members of Congress, U.S. senators, all after the 15th Amendment, all before 1890 took it away. As a future attorney growing up in the 60s, Rhodes carried that knowledge with him.
I knew even in the 1960s that we had made progress before.
In 1875, Mississippi developed what became known as the Mississippi Plan: organized violence, economic intimidation, a systematic strategy to destroy Reconstruction and strip Black Mississippians of their political power. By 1890, Mississippi didn't need violence anymore. They wrote it into law. The 1890 Constitutional Convention wasn't subtle about its purpose. 16 WAPT has been covering this story for years. Back in 2019, we reported on Mississippi's felony disenfranchisement law.
You have the 1890 Constitution, and it was rewritten specifically to dilute the Black vote, and not even dilute, but to eliminate the Black vote.
A provision written into that 1890 Constitution, still blocking thousands of Mississippians from the polls, a law initially designed to discriminate. In 2024, a federal appeals court ruled that law does not violate the U.S. Constitution. 135 years later, it remains in effect today. But Mississippi also produced the resistance. One of the faces of that resistance was Medgar Evers. As the NAACP's first field secretary in Mississippi, Evers spent years organizing voters, investigating lynchings and racial violence, and pushing for equal access to education, employment, and the ballot box. He helped form the Council of Federated Organizations, known as COFO, and became the organizational backbone of the voting rights fight in Mississippi. That same year, 9 Tougaloo College students walked into the whites-only Jackson Public Library and asked to read. They were arrested. Known today as the Tougaloo Nine, their peaceful protest helped desegregate Jackson's public libraries and demonstrated the growing courage of activists. Evers' work to expose injustice made him a target. He was shot and killed on June 12, 1963, by a white supremacist in the driveway of his Jackson home. His death shocked the nation, but his work inspired a new generation of activists who refused to let the movement die with him. That movement drew attention from across the country. The summer of 1964, Freedom Summer, hundreds of volunteers flooded the state to register Black voters. One of the most powerful voices of the movement came from the Mississippi Delta. Fannie Lou Hamer, a sharecropper, tried to register to vote in 1962, a decision that cost her her job and home, and she was brutally beaten. She helped found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. When she spoke, America listened.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
In 1964, her testimony before the Democratic National Convention brought the reality of Mississippi's voting system to a national audience. Black Mississippians attempting to register to vote were met with violence, arrests, murder. But ordinary Mississippians like farmers and teachers stood in line anyway. Black voters faced literacy tests, arbitrary questions like how many bubbles were in a bar of soap, and registrars who could reject them for any reason. In many counties, the consequences of pushing back were well known. Flauncey Brown Wright went through that process herself.
And so I gave him my questionnaire, and I stood toe to toe, and I dressed up that day, and just waiting for him to tell me that I had passed. And so I looked at him, he looked at me, and I said, "Well, sir, how did I do?" I just knew I had aced it. He said, "Well, you didn't pass. You didn't," very angrily, "you didn't pass." So I said, "Well, sir, what was my mistake?" And he called me the N-word and told me, I said, "You didn't pass, get the hell out of my office."
Brown Wright walked out of that office and down the corridor of the Madison County Courthouse and decided if they wouldn't let her in, she'd run for office herself. She made a promise that day that she was going to get that man's job. On November 5th, 1968, Flauncey Brown Wright became the first African-American woman elected to public office in Mississippi since Reconstruction. She didn't get his job. She got the job that supervised him. Mississippi's resistance forced America's hand. Cases originating right here expanded federal voting protections in 1969 and again in 1977. On August 6, 1965, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. For nearly 6 decades, the Voting Rights Act stood as the backbone of voting protection for every American. Then the courts changed direction. In 2013, the Supreme Court's decision in Shelby County v. Holder gutted Section 5, the provision that required states with histories of discrimination to get federal approval before changing voting laws. On April 29th of this year, the court went further. In Louisiana v. Calais, the court limited how Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act can be applied in certain redistricting cases. Supporters of the decision say it provides clearer guidance for states drawing political maps. The critics argue it further weakens one of the last major enforcement tools of the Voting Rights Act. In her dissent, Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan warned the decision could significantly reduce the effectiveness of Section 2. In her words, it's all but a dead letter. Mississippi's own legislative maps are now being reconsidered under that ruling.
We are too big as a state to fit in a 1950s box. We need to be looking forward.
2 steps forward, 1 step back. Because we made progress from the 1960s up until now. Now we're going back and we're repeating that history of the first Mississippi Plan.
When Attorney Rhodes looks at what the Supreme Court has done after working decades to secure the vote, he doesn't just see a legal rollback. He sees a historical pattern and a warning. Without federal protection restored, Rhodes says there is the possibility of violence at the polls in 2026 and 2028, spurred on today by national leaders.
The U.S. Supreme Court is doing the same thing now that Rutherford B. Hayes did. He withdrew federal troops from the South who were protecting the right to vote.
As America celebrates 250 years, it's worth pausing on what those years actually looked like. Women couldn't vote until 1920. That's 106 years out of 250. For black men, roughly 68 years. For black women, even less, 61. The promise has never applied equally. And in Mississippi, the fight to change that wrote history. 155 years after the 15th Amendment, 61 years after the Voting Rights Act, Mississippi is still at the center of the American voting rights story. Not as a relic, as a battleground.
It was
at the heart of what America could have become. And they chose the path of betrayal. They chose the path of traitorism. They chose the path of race-based human ownership, and they didn't have to.
That question is not just Mississippi's to answer. It belongs to all of America, and there are those who refuse to stop fighting for the answer.
250 years of seeking to perfect democracy that's not perfect yet, and we must perfect democracy. You know, you had a generation who went away and fought in World War II for democracy abroad, only to come back up to Mississippi and realize they didn't have it here.
38 words ratified in 1870. The promise has never been fully kept. But in every generation, Americans have refused to stop fighting for civil rights. On America's 250th birthday, that fight is very much alive.
Here at Vicksburg National Military Park, the battle that helped change America forever was fought right on these sacred grounds. As you look at these historic images from the park, you can see the devastation left behind. Soldiers in the trenches, cannons stretching across the hills, and the grounds where thousands fought and died during the 47-day siege of Vicksburg. The Union victory here split the Confederacy in two and changed the course of the Civil War. Tonight, 16 WAPT's Allie Ware takes us inside the battle that put Vicksburg at the center of American history.
The Mississippi River flows through the heart of America, carrying commerce from north to south. More than 160 years ago, it carried hopes of two armies locked in a fight over the future of the nation.
It was Abraham Lincoln that said that controlling the Mississippi River is the key to winning the Civil War. And so Ulysses S. Grant, who was the general that led the Union Army, a part of his strategy in terms of taking over the river was what we now know of as the Vicksburg Campaign.
This idea is that you're gonna blockade all of the ports along the Atlantic and Gulf Coast and then seize the Mississippi River. Because even today, rivers are superhighways. You could control any traffic that's coming up and down the river, and until they were able to seize Vicksburg, they couldn't maintain that flow of the river. And so this is why it's so significant, and this is why Grant will fight.
The fight over the river led to Union forces surrounding Vicksburg and sieging it for 47 days, making supplies scarce for the Confederate Army and civilians in the city. Families abandoned their homes and dug holes into hillsides just to survive. But for many enslaved people, the arrival of the Union troops brought a chance at freedom.
So what's happening also at the same time that the siege is happening is the U.S. Army is starting to recruit African Americans, former enslaved, freemen, to fight as part of this fight for them for freedom.
Thousands and thousands of enslaved people are leaving plantations and literally just following the Union Army.
Vicksburg surrendered on July 4th, 1863. The Union gained control of the Mississippi River, splitting the Confederacy in two and marking a turning point in the war. The war reshaped communities, transformed the lives of enslaved people, and with Mississippi being so dependent on free and forced labor to harvest cotton, it altered the economic future of the state.
A lot of historians would argue that we're still recovering from the Civil War. We're always trying to identify new industry to be a part of.
Echoes of the Civil War are still alive in the preserved battlefields and the lessons learned during battle.
Still to this day, we will have groups coming from the modern military to come to the battlefield and do what's called a staff ride to learn about what was done here at Vicksburg.
Today, historians are working to broaden the story of the Civil War. The two Mississippi museums carries the history forward, connecting slavery, war, emancipation, Jim Crow, and civil rights.
You can't really fully appreciate the state without understanding that we've come a long ways since the institution of slavery.
From the decision to leave the Union to the battle that split it in two, Mississippi not only helped define the Civil War, but continues to shape America today.
From here at Vicksburg National Military Park, the Mississippi River is just in the distance. During the Civil War, control of that waterway meant control of the nation's future. The Mississippi River stretches more than 2,300 miles, flowing from Lake Itasca in Minnesota all the way to the Gulf of Mexico in Louisiana. And for generations, it helped build this country, connecting communities and driving the American economy from north to south. 16 WAPT's Kamari Hamer takes us along the river that helped shape America.
As vehicles drive over the Mississippi River every day, it is easy to overlook the impact the waterway has on Mississippi's economy, culture, and history.
So the Mississippi River is, it's the lifeline of our national economy.
Commander of the Vicksburg District of the United States Army Corps of Engineers Jeremiah Gibson says, the river is much more than a landmark. It remains one of the most important transportation corridors in America, carrying agricultural products and other goods from Mississippi and much of the nation's heartland to markets all around the world. Gibson says that role is especially important in a state where agriculture remains one of the largest industries.
It drives the economy. You have a lot of agriculture that comes out of Mississippi, so transporting it on the river is the best way to.
And the river's influence stretches far beyond commerce. For more than 2 centuries, the Mississippi River has helped define the state's identity. The waterway helped shape river cities, fueled the cotton economy, and influenced culture that would make Mississippi known around the world.
I think about Greenwood to Greenville. I think about Vicksburg to Natchez. Everywhere along those great cities through the Delta and along the river is driven from a cultural perspective. We're talking music, we're talking art, from an economy perspective, we're talking agriculture and industry. The Mississippi River and the state of Mississippi will always be linked.
And that connection is reflected in the numbers. Gibson says roughly $500 billion worth of commerce moves along the Mississippi River every year, helping support Mississippi's economy and keeping American goods competitive across the globe.
The state economy is about $160 billion annually. Well, there's about $500 billion that transports on the Mississippi River and allows our entire nation to compete.
One of the river's greatest challenges came decades later when the Great Flood of 1927 devastated communities throughout the Mississippi River Valley, including parts of Mississippi. The disaster led to major changes in how the nation manages flooding and helped shape many of the flood control projects still protecting communities today.
So following the flood of 1927, Congress issued the Flood Control Act of 1928, and that's what spurred on what we call the Mississippi River Tributary Project, which allows all those flood control projects in northern Mississippi, the reservoirs. It allows all the levee systems that protect the farms and communities and cities that thrive next to the river.
As Mississippi's economy continues to rely on the river for jobs, agriculture, and trade, officials say keeping that waterway open will remain critical for communities across the state and for the nation's economy.
Mississippi has helped shape more than just American history. It helped shape American politics. From the halls of Congress to the White House campaign trail, the Magnolia State produced some of the most powerful and controversial political figures in the country. We're moving from the Mississippi River back to the heart of the capital city and to one of the most historic buildings in the state. Next, and later, from the Blues Trail to the big screen, to Southern cooking known around the world. How Mississippi culture helped influence America far beyond state lines. Welcome back. From the Civil War to civil rights to modern day politics, many of the debates that shaped America also played out right here in Mississippi. Here at the old state capitol in downtown Jackson, some of the state's most important political decisions were made. 16 WAPT's Carlos Garcia takes a look at the political figures who helped put Mississippi on the national stage.
Mississippi's political influence has extended from the state's earliest days all the way to modern Washington, D.C. Over the last 2 centuries, leaders from Mississippi have helped guide national policy, shaped major debates, and influenced some of the most important moments in American history. Andrew Jackson served as a judge and military commander in the Mississippi Territory before becoming the 7th President of the United States. Jackson expanded presidential power, championed westward expansion, and helped define the role of the executive branch during the early years of the Republic. Few Mississippians are more recognizable than Jefferson Davis. Before leading the Confederacy during the Civil War, Davis served as a U.S. Congressman, Senator, and Secretary of War. His leadership during the nation's greatest internal conflict secured his place as one of the most consequential and controversial figures in American history. In the 20th century, John C. Stennis became one of the most powerful members of the United States Senate. During his more than 4 decades in office, he helped shape military policy during the Cold War and became a leading voice on national defense issues. 3, 2, 1. Today, NASA's Stennis Space Center in Hancock County, the agency's primary and America's largest rocket propulsion test site, serves as a reminder of his legacy. Few Mississippi politicians wielded more influence in the nation's capital than Thad Cochran. During his nearly 4 decades in the U.S. Senate, Cochran helped steer federal funding to Mississippi, shape national defense and agriculture policy, and became known for his bipartisan leadership on Capitol Hill. Former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour served 2 terms in office, and he's known for guiding the state through some of its toughest times, like Hurricane Katrina in 2005 and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. Others who have played a part in the Magnolia State's influence on America, like former Mississippi Governor Kirk Fordyce, the state's first Republican governor since Reconstruction, William Winter, known for education reform in Mississippi, and Ross Barnett, who opposed civil rights, along with Hiram Revels, the first African-American senator from Mississippi, former U.S. Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, and former U.S. Agriculture Secretary Mike Espy, to current-day politicians like Congressman Benny Thompson, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, and Governor Tate Reeves.
From the battlefields of Vicksburg to the White House, Ulysses S. Grant helped lead the nation through one of the most defining chapters in American history, and he's remembered by Mississippi for it. While not from our state, Grant made his name during the Vicksburg campaign of the Civil War. Union forces fought to take control of the Mississippi River and split the Confederacy in 2. His legacy lives on at Mississippi State University in Starkville, home to the Ulysses S. Grant Presidential Library. The museum features thousands of Civil War artifacts, historic documents, interactive exhibits, and one of the largest private Abraham Lincoln collections in the country. The library is open weekdays from 8 to 5 and Saturdays from 10 to 2. Admission is free for visitors wanting to explore a piece of American history right here in Mississippi. From small-town Mississippi to one of the most recognizable names in entertainment history. Before the Muppets became a worldwide phenomenon, Jim Henson was creating characters that would help change American television forever. The Mississippi roots of a Hollywood legend. Mississippi did not just help change education here at home, it helped change how America educates millions of students. Aaron Pickens joins you next with a look at how Mississippi created the first statewide community college system in America and how it changed higher education across the country forever. And I'll be back a bit later in Chronicles.